Hey guys, I'm Lil K-Hole, and today I'm going to teach you guys everything you need to know about scales, keys, and chord progressions. This tutorial is aimed at the complete beginner, so I'm actually going to outline all of this music theory in a practical way. A way that you are going to be confident in yourself that you know how to use the knowledge that I'm passing down onto you. I'm also going to be using these same chord progressions to make, a simple lo-fi beat to play in the outro, so make sure you stick around so you can have a listen at the end. I hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Alright, so I'd just like to take a brief moment to discuss scales. Scales are just a collection of notes that are related to each other, that you are allowed to play together when making music. This collection of notes that you choose are the most ideal notes to play together because they're able to create what's called like constructive interference and resonance in between each of the individual notes when they're out in the open. Scales, like I said, are collections of notes, which means that they can have any amounts of notes, whereas basically 21 seems to be the max. There are some scales that have as little as 2 notes, called diatonic scales, and those are very primitive kinds of scales, like probably used back in caveman times when we were hitting rocks on things, or like maybe stretching a skin over like a hole or something and learning that, oh hey, like if we stretch this animal skin really hard, it will make sounds, right? And then we have these crazy over-the-top scales that have upwards of 21 notes, which would take into account not only sharps, flats, and regular natural notes, but it also incorporates what's called microtones. Now, before I move on, I would like to go and discuss what a sharp, a flat, and a natural note is, in case people don't know. So, for example, right here, I'm going to write down a C. So if I were to use the C major scale, which is, in my opinion, the easiest scale to use because it only uses these white notes here. If I were to take the C note here and I were to make it sharp, I would bring it up to this black key here and it'll have this little pound symbol right here. That is C sharp. So this means that it is 1 semitone sharper than C, which means that it is 1 semitone higher in pitch. If we take this D though, and we were to go from D into the next note, which was maybe C sharp, well, because the C sharp, since you started on D, is 1 semitone lower in pitch than D, that's what is called a flat. So, if we take a look, C7, this C note can become C flat. Bruh. Get a load of this guy. He says C flat is a C sharp, Lamau. Oh my gosh. Anyways, let's get back to the video. This D note can become D flat. This C note can become D flat. This D note can become C sharp. Interchangeable vocabulary. That's something I would like to highlight because I've recently actually have been teaching some people music and how to play music, and when one of the big questions they had when I was teaching them about scales and how these are sort of like the notes that are able to complement each other really well. They didn't understand so much that, oh, sharps and flats are the same things, or the in-between notes. It just depends on context. So that's what I'm trying to really drive in here, is context. Alright, so in a typical major or minor key, you'll have 7 degrees of pitch, which may or may not include a natural note, like a white key. They might include sharps, like this A sharp, or they might incorporate a flat, like this E flat right here. And like I said, the C major scale is the easiest scale to practice with because it only uses what are called natural notes, these white notes. I also mentioned earlier that scales have what are called scale degrees. Scale degrees you can think of as the number that you can assign to each note. So if we were to take a look at the C major scale, the first note, also called the tonic or the root note, would be C. The second note, also called the supertonic, is right here, the D. Next, I'd like to talk about the third. In our case here, the C major scale, the third is the E note. So if we were to take these together and play a chord, this chord right here would be the first and the third. Sounds kind of happy? If I were to make it flat, like I was telling you earlier about minor keys, now it sounds a little sad. So what I like to think of the third is as one of the notes that gives a vibe. Easiest way to just kind of compartmentalize that in your brain. Third, vibe chord. Alright, so the fourth is called the subdominant. The subdominant is the note below the perfect fifth. Everybody knows the perfect fifth. It's called the subdominant because, like I said, some notes are able to overpower the root, like the subdominant and the dominant. Now the thing is though, the subdominant kind of has a same relationship as the tonic and the supertonic. The subdominant isn't as loud as the tonic, or sorry, as the fifth, the dominant G, right? Just like how the C7 here isn't louder or dominant over the D7. The next scale degree is called the sixth, or the submediant, and in our case that would be the A. Alright, so the next and final note is the seventh, also called the leading tone, and in the C major scale that would be B. Now the reason why it's called the leading tone is because it likes to resolve into the next octave C, which would be the next tonic first note of the next octave. Alright, so before we get into everything, I just want to show you guys how you guys can get your piano roll just like mine, where it shows all of your notes. And on top of that, I want to show you how you can use FL Studio to just kind of choose what key you're in. So if we go up here to the piano roll options, we can go down to stamp. And if you notice, it has all of these. Melodic scales, melodic chords, percussions, specials and stuff. It's fantastic. So if we were to go and do minor, or major here, and we were to hold our left mouse button down, it brings the scale up for us to stamp on top. So if we wanted the C scale, we put it here. Wanted the C sharp scale, we put it there. Wanted D sharp, put it there. D, we want it there, and it automatically transposes everything into the right notes. So as you can tell, this one has a C sharp and an F sharp, right? So it's not completely white keys for this key. But if I were to bring it down to C, it's all white keys. If I bring it up to A, oh well, if you take a look there, there's a C sharp, and there's a G sharp and an F sharp. Well, that means that this one's got 3 sharps in it instead of 2. So yeah, see how this chord shape changes, or sorry, the scale shape and notes and stuff change as you move it. And that's because, as you can tell, there's a little bit of a pattern going on. A major pattern will start off with the next note is a tone away from the previous note, and then the next note is a tone away, then a semitone, and then another tone, another tone, another tone, and then another semitone back up to C, just like that. Pretty cool, eh? Alright, and now last but not least, I'm going to show you guys how to get these note indicators on your piano roll, because that's really important and it is very life-changing. So if you go down to, there should be a view button right here, view, and you go down to key labels and you click on all notes. So let's do that right here. We'll click on view, key labels, all notes, and they show them all up here. And that's all I really wanted to highlight before we get into the next part, so I'll see you soon. Alright, so I would just like to take some time to highlight chords and chord progressions in this section. So, if we remember from our last segment, each note has a scale degree associated with it. Well, we'll know that our C note, our root note, is our 1. If we wanted to create a chord, we might want to add some extra notes to complement this one. And a way you can do that is just adding a fifth note, the fifth. In our case, that's the G. And this creates what's called a power chord. These are used so often in rock and metal music on the guitar. I don't think you could go through a single song without really seeing a power chord, honestly, nowadays. Power chords are just kind of the backbone of some of that more like faster paced type music that you might have seen. You can add the third scale degree to the power chord here, and what that does is it sort of gives character to the chord, you can think. In our case, this is C, E, G, which is the C major chord. The C major chord, being a major chord, would sound happy. So let's give it a listen. Pretty cool. Sounds happy. Well, let's see what happens if we bring it down to a flat third, which makes it the minor third and thus sad. Let's give it a listen to these guys side by side. See? A little bit of a darker vibe there. Let's listen to them split apart so we can definitely differentiate the two of them. See? Completely different vibes. Now, triads aren't completely where you are limited at. You could also add the seventh note, which in our case is the B. Notice how it gives it a cool vibe. What it's doing is adding a minor third up here in the seventh position. So you have your major third here in the minor, in the major position, and then you have your minor third up here in the seventh position. And that creates sort of a mixed vibe. And these 7 chords you'll encounter a lot during jazz music. If you're watching this, you're probably interested in lo-fi. So lo-fi, we like to use jazz a lot. Jazz keys, jazz progressions, jazz techniques, you name it. Although we aren't completely limited to just jazz. In jazz, though, you do use the 7 a lot. So you can imagine that you may hear in my music and other people's music lots of 7s. You're also, of course, not limited to just giving it the 7 because it's music. You do whatever you want. You can play out of key. It doesn't matter. In our case, the 9th is the D. So the D, the 9th, always creates a sort of dissonant effect. And it helps build what's called tension into the next note. I particularly don't like 9 chords that are like this, that are 5 whole notes. I particularly like what's called an add 9 chord, where you add the 9 on top of the major triad, and it sounds like this. It just sounds more pretty, in my opinion. And that is the gist of adding some additional notes to your chords to make them sound more full and better. But of course, that's not where I'm going to end. Next, I'm going to talk to you about layering your chords, and then I'm going to talk about adding what's called a suspended second or a suspended fourth. So let's get right into that. Okay, when you want to create full sounding, nice saturated chords, you're going to want to make sure that you add your octave. And you could even add 2 if you want. Like, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, try adding 2 and let's see what it sounds like. You hear that? A lot more full. We could even give it a nice quick comparison to a regular C major chord. See? A lot more full. And, of course, you can always do things like adding a 7. Gives it a little bit more character, in my opinion. A 9. An add 9. Or, like I mentioned earlier, we can make suspended chords. And as you heard, there was the suspended second and the suspended fourth. So you can imagine that it might have something to do with your third. If you're to take your third and lower it down to the second scale degree, which is the D, it'll create a sound like this. And it's really cool. I love that sound because it really, really wants to resolve back up to the E here. So let's give that a quick listen. See how it's tense and then it's kind of relaxing? Same thing with the fourth. So you could use these additional seconds, fourths, sevenths, and eighths, and ninths and stuff to build up some tension and stuff, and then resolve it into some pretty sounding notes, and you will be able to create some intricate and lovely sounding music doing this. In the next segment, I'd like to get into scale degrees and how they are used to make chord progressions. Alright, so like we learned, scale degrees assign letters to numbers, and we could use that to make chord progressions. And I've gone through and actually selected a few of the popular ones and, you know, pre-made them so that we could just listen to them and more or less appreciate the music theory and try to solidify the music theory rather than just building chords. So if we take a look, this one is called the 1-4-5 pattern. This one just goes from the root to the fourth and to the fifth. It's a very, very basic pattern, and it just sounds like it's rising in pitch. Nice and happy, go lucky sound in my opinion. The next one that I'm going to show you is the 1-4-1-5. It's very similar. This one kind of sounds like it's trying to tell a bit of a story, just because it keeps going back down to the root and then going somewhere else. The next one, the 1-5-6-4 pattern, is a very, very popular pattern. This one's used a lot in modern day music, whether it's rap, pop, prog rock, I don't know, reggae. Everybody uses this chord progression. It's so easy. And it sounds nice and pleasant. You could always move it around. You don't need to go straight to the fifth. You could go to the fourth and the sixth and the fifth, or you could go to the sixth and the fifth and the fourth. It's all up to you. The next one is the 2-5-1 chord progression, and this one is particularly used a lot in jazz music. So if we take a look here, this one right here is our first, so we're actually going to put that over here in the third. We're going to go over here to the D minor chord, and then we're going to go to the fifth, which is the G chord right here. Very jazzy chord progression right there. That is one of the most popular jazz chord progressions you'll ever encounter, though it's not always going to be 2-5-1. You might encounter like 2-5-1-1, or you might encounter like a 2-1-5-1 where these guys are switched like so. You can have the 2 1s in the middle and the 2, the 5 on the outside. Like, there's so many possibilities you can have with just these chord progressions. And each of these chord progressions are the backbone of a song. And now, since I've explained this in detail and for so long, I'm going to quickly time-lapse me making a quick beat with these simple chord progressions, and then I will play them for you at the end of the song. And in the meantime, I would like for you guys to like, comment, and subscribe. Enjoy the time lapse. Alright, so that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and cue the outro!